I slept alone after locking my door, but a tiny wolf woman woke up next to me. Leo had always been a creature of habit. He lived alone in a small, modest apartment in a quiet corner of the city. His life was mostly uneventful. Work, home, the occasional movie or walk in the park. Nothing too exciting. But tonight, after a particularly exhausting day, Leo was looking forward to a good night's sleep. He locked the doors, checked the windows, and curled up under his blanket, feeling the comfort of solitude around him. It wasn't a bad life, not at all. In fact, Leo was quite content with his routine. But tonight, something felt different. There was an odd, almost electric tension in the air, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. But the moment he lay down, his mind began to shut off, and soon he was fast asleep, his body sinking into the softness of his bed. Hours later, Leo's eyes snapped open. He blinked, confused. Something felt off. The room was still dark, and for a moment he thought he might still be dreaming. His mind tried to make sense of the strange feeling, and his hand instinctively reached for the nightstand. But his hand didn't find the cool surface of wood. Instead, it brushed against something soft and warm. Leo froze. His heart began to race, panic crawling up his throat. He could barely make out the shapes in the dark, but the warmth beside him felt so real. His eyes darted around, trying to focus. The room was eerily silent except for his own shallow breaths. His hand instinctively gripped the blanket tighter, and that's when he felt it, a soft, furry tail flick across his leg. He gasped and sat up quickly, his pulse pounding in his ears. There, nestled next to him under the blanket, was a small, wolf-like creature. Her fur was a mix of silver and white, her small ears pointed and twitching in the darkness. She was curled up, her tiny body relaxed as she slept peacefully. For a moment, Leo wondered if he was still dreaming. The figure next to him didn't make any sense. How had she gotten here? He was certain he had locked every door, every window. He swallowed hard and slowly reached out to touch her. His fingers brushed against her fur, and it was soft, almost impossibly soft. She stirred slightly but didn't wake up, her small chest rising and falling with every breath. Leo leaned back against the headboard, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. She couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. His thoughts whirled, but his body refused to move. There was something magnetic about the tiny wolf woman beside him, something both beautiful and unsettling. Her fur glowed faintly in the dim light, and her features, while wolf-like, had a certain elegance to them that left him in awe. Minutes passed. Leo's mind scrambled for answers. Was she an animal, some kind of supernatural creature? Or perhaps this was all just a vivid dream, a trick his mind had decided to play on him in his sleep-deprived state. But no, this felt far too real. The wolf woman let out a soft sigh in her sleep, her delicate form shifting slightly as she stretched, causing the blanket to shift with her. Leo felt the soft fabric brush against his legs as she moved. Her eyes opened slowly, and Leo's breath caught in his throat. They were amber, bright, and almost glowing in the dark, like two small lanterns in the night. For a moment their gazes locked. The wolf woman didn't appear frightened, just curious. She stared at him as if she had been expecting him. Leo's heart raced faster, and he found himself speechless, unable to form a coherent thought. She blinked a few times, her head tilting slightly to one side as she studied him in silence. What are you doing here?" Leo finally stammered, his voice barely a whisper. His mind scrambled to make sense of the situation, but no logical explanation came to him. The wolf woman didn't answer. Instead, she slowly moved, sitting up with an effortless grace, her tiny body still curled in a way that reminded him of a fox or a wild wolf. She stretched again, the motion fluid and smooth, as though she had done this 1,000 times. Leo just stared, dumbfounded. She looked around the room, sniffing the air with a twitch of her nose. It seemed like she was trying to make sense of her surroundings. Her eyes flicked back to Leo, and for the first time he noticed something else. There was a look of confusion in her gaze, a kind of innocent bewilderment, as if she had no idea how she ended up here. Leo's heart softened slightly. Despite his fear and the uncertainty swirling in his mind, there was something about her that made him feel protective. She was small, fragile-looking, and entirely out of place in his world. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice a little less shaky this time. The wolf woman only blinked, her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. She reached up to touch her head as though trying to make sense of something, but Leo couldn't tell what she was doing. She didn't appear threatening in the least. In fact, she seemed almost lost. Leo wasn't sure what to do. His mind raced with a million thoughts. She was clearly not from Earth. No creature here looked like her. Was she some kind of alien, a creature from another world, or was there some other explanation? Before he could gather his thoughts further, the wolf woman suddenly jumped to her feet, her small form moving quickly and effortlessly across the bed. She looked at Leo, her amber eyes still filled with that mix of curiosity and confusion. She took a few steps closer to him, and Leo instinctively flinched back, afraid she might attack. But she didn't. Instead, she pointed at the door. Leo stared at her in confusion. She pointed again, this time more urgently, her sharp claws making a soft tapping sound against the floor as her small finger hovered near the door handle. "Do you want to leave?" Leo asked, his voice a little uncertain. The idea seemed strange. Why would she want to leave now when she had just woken up in his bed? The wolf woman didn't answer. She simply gave him a small, nodding gesture and then went to the door, her movements quick and precise, almost like a predator. She stopped by the door and looked at him again, waiting. Leo didn't know what to make of this. Was she trying to escape? Or was she trying to tell him something? Whatever it was, he felt an overwhelming urge to help her. She was here for a reason, and though he couldn't understand what that reason was, he had to trust that he could figure it out. With a deep breath, Leo swung his legs off the bed and stood up. He slowly walked toward the door, unsure of what was going to happen next. As soon as the door was open, the wolf woman darted out with a speed that took him completely by surprise. She was fast, faster than any normal creature. In the blink of an eye, she was gone, disappearing into the dark hallway outside his apartment. Leo stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been just moments before. His mind was still spinning, trying to process the events of the night. How had she gotten here? Who was she? And why had she left so suddenly? But as the cool night air filled the room, Leo couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something much larger. Something that would change his life in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. And though his mind was filled with questions, one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. The next morning, Leo couldn't shake the strange feeling from his mind. He had spent the entire night trying to make sense of what had happened. The little wolf woman, the one who had appeared out of nowhere, curled up in his bed, was a mystery. He had checked the apartment over and over again, even though he knew there was no way she could have gotten in without him noticing. But the question lingered. Where had she gone? Why had she left so suddenly? Leo spent the morning pacing around his apartment, his thoughts scattered. His usual routine, coffee, breakfast, checking his phone, felt odd now. The normalcy of his day couldn't match the whirlwind of confusion he felt after the events of last night. As the hours passed, he began to question whether he had imagined the whole thing. But the memories were too vivid, too clear to dismiss. He remembered the warmth of her fur against his skin, the glowing amber of her eyes. She was real, there was no doubt about that. By noon, Leo had tried calling a few friends, hoping they would offer some insight or at least distract him from his racing thoughts. But no one seemed to have an explanation for what had happened. He hadn't told them the full story, of course. Who would believe him? A tiny wolf woman appearing in his bed overnight? It sounded absurd. With nothing left to do, Leo decided to head out for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear his mind. He needed to think, and maybe a change of scenery would help him sort through the confusion. As he walked through the quiet streets of the city, Leo's thoughts drifted back to the wolf woman. She had looked so lost, so confused. When she pointed to the door last night, it was as though she wanted to leave, but not because she was afraid. It was more like she needed to find something, or someone else. But what was it? After an hour of aimless walking, Leo returned to his apartment. He was no closer to finding answers, but he felt an odd sense of calm. Maybe whatever had happened last night would sort itself out. He couldn't control it, so he might as well let it go for now. Leo unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence of his apartment greeting him. He tossed his jacket on the couch and went to make a quick lunch. As he prepared his sandwich, a sudden movement caught his eye. The door to his bedroom was slightly ajar. His heart skipped a beat. Leo approached cautiously, every muscle in his body tensing. He had locked the door before he left. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. But now the door was open, and that same sense of unease from the night before returned. He stepped forward and pushed the door open fully, peering inside. At first, he saw nothing. The room was empty, just as it had been when he left. But then out of the corner of his eye, Leo saw movement. The tiny wolf woman was sitting on the edge of his bed, her back turned to him. She was still in her wolf form, her silver fur shining in the light. She was looking down at her hands, which she had curled into small, clawed fists. Leo noticed that her tail, usually relaxed, was flicking restlessly. She didn't seem to hear him come in, or if she did, she didn't acknowledge his presence. He stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do. The last time he had seen her, she had disappeared into the hallway, and now here she was again, back in his room. But why? What did she want? He cleared his throat, and she instantly looked up, her amber eyes locking with his. There was no sign of fear in her gaze, only curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to figure him out, and Leo felt a strange connection to her, as though she was searching for something that he had yet to understand. I didn't expect you to be here, Leo said, his voice hesitant. He had no idea what he was doing, but it seemed like the right thing to say. He couldn't just stand there staring at her, but he wasn't sure how to act either. The wolf woman didn't respond, but she slowly stood up, her tiny form moving with the grace of a predator. She was no bigger than a child, but there was an undeniable strength in the way she carried herself. Leo watched her closely, wondering if she would do something unexpected again. She didn't move to leave this time. Instead, she crossed the room and stopped right in front of him. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to read his emotions to understand him. "Are you okay?" Leo asked quietly. It was a silly question, he knew, but it felt like the right one. She had seemed lost and confused last night, and today she appeared just as unsure. He couldn't help but wonder if she was in some kind of trouble, or if she was simply far from home. The wolf woman made a soft sound in the back of her throat, half growl, half sigh, and then lowered her gaze to the floor. She glanced around the room as though taking in her surroundings. Then, to Leo's surprise, she made a small, almost imperceptible motion with her hand, as if reaching out toward something she couldn't quite grasp. Leo followed her gaze, but there was nothing there. His confusion deepened. What was she trying to communicate? He didn't have long to ponder this, though, because the wolf woman suddenly reached out and touched his arm. Her fingers were soft, but her claws scraped gently against his skin. Leo's breath caught in his throat at the unexpected contact. It wasn't painful, but the sensation of her touch, so delicate and yet so full of purpose, was enough to make his heart race. She didn't pull away immediately. Instead, her gaze met his again, and for the first time, Leo saw something familiar in her eyes, something like desperation. She wasn't just lost. She was searching for something, and it was as if Leo was the only one who could help her find it. "I don't understand what you want," Leo said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign, useless. How could he help her if he didn't even know what she needed? The wolf woman stared at him for a long time. Her tail flicked once more, but she didn't make a sound. For a moment they just stood there, caught in some strange, unspoken connection. Then, as if on cue, she gently released his arm and turned toward the window. She walked over to it, her small steps light and graceful, and stared out at the city beyond. Leo followed her, unsure of what to do next. "What is it?" he asked softly, his curiosity getting the better of him. He wasn't sure if she could understand his words, but he had to ask. To his surprise, the wolf woman nodded, then pointed to the horizon. She moved closer to the window, her small form standing at the glass, and she looked back at him, eyes wide with something Leo couldn't quite place. Longing, perhaps. It was as if she was waiting for him to figure something out, but Leo was still lost. He stepped closer, glancing at her, then back at the view. The city was bustling with activity, people walking the streets, cars moving along the road, the hum of everyday life. And yet, something in the wolf woman's gaze told Leo that she didn't belong here. That she had come from somewhere far away, somewhere that wasn't part of his world. Leo finally understood that she wasn't just asking for help. She was pleading for something, some kind of connection that he couldn't yet comprehend. Before he could think of anything else to say, she turned back to him and without warning made a small, sharp gesture toward the door. It was subtle, but the meaning was clear. She wanted to leave again. This time, Leo didn't hesitate. He stepped aside, allowing her to pass. As she walked by, her small form brushed against his side, and he felt a strange warmth that wasn't just physical. There was something profound in the way she moved, in the way she looked at him, as if she was inviting him into something much bigger than he could imagine. Leo took a deep breath, watching her disappear out of the room. He knew he had to follow. He had no idea where this strange journey would take them, but one thing was certain. His life was no longer going to be ordinary. Leo followed the wolf woman through the apartment, his mind still buzzing with questions. What did she want? Where was she trying to go? Why had she come to him? It didn't make sense, and yet the strange connection he felt toward her grew stronger with every passing moment. He could feel her presence like an invisible thread pulling him forward, urging him to follow. She moved with an odd mix of confidence and uncertainty, her small, wolf-like form darting across the room as if she knew exactly where she was going. Yet there was a hesitation in her movements, a hint of vulnerability that made Leo feel protective. Her glowing amber eyes flicked over her shoulder to check that he was still behind her, and for the first time since she had appeared in his apartment, Leo wondered if she might be as lost as he felt. She reached the door to the hallway and paused, her ears flicking nervously as if listening for something. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Was there someone else out there? Another person, or something worse? He hadn't noticed anyone when he came home, but now he felt an unsettling chill in the air. The wolf woman nudged the door open with a swift, fluid movement and peered into the hallway. She sniffed the air, her small nostrils flaring as if searching for a scent. Leo's stomach tightened with unease. What was she sensing? What was she hearing that he could? Then, without warning, she stepped into the hallway, her movements quick and purposeful. Leo hesitated for a moment but followed her, his feet echoing softly on the wooden floors as he stepped out into the unknown. The apartment complex was quiet, the usual noise from the street outside muffled by the thick walls. But Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He looked down at the tiny wolf woman who was already several steps ahead, her ears pricked as she moved down the hall. She seemed so sure of herself, as if she was on a mission. The way she carried herself, despite her small size, made it clear that she was used to being in control, even if she didn't understand where she was or how she had ended up here. As they reached the stairwell, Leo tried to speak to her. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice soft but full of curiosity. She didn't answer, but when she looked back at him, her gaze was steady, as if urging him to trust her. He couldn't deny that he felt the urge to follow her wherever she went. There was something magnetic about her, something that made him feel like this wasn't just an accident. She had come here for a reason. Leo couldn't explain why, but he felt that he was part of that reason. They descended the stairs in silence, Leo's footsteps matching the wolf woman's quick pace. She was far more agile than he could ever hope to be, her tiny frame moving with grace and precision. The muscles in her legs rippled beneath her fur as she darted down the stairs, her tail flicking behind her in a rhythmic motion. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, but Leo was left in the dark, his mind racing with questions. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, Leo looked around. The building was quiet, almost eerily so. The usual hum of neighbors talking or doors opening and closing was absent. There was no one in sight, no sign of life. It was as if the entire building had emptied out. The wolf woman stopped at the door leading to the outside and pressed her paw against the handle. Leo watched her closely, unsure of what she was doing. She wasn't trying to escape. It wasn't fear that guided her movements. It was purpose. She wanted something, and Leo had no idea what it was. She looked up at him, her amber eyes meeting his, and for the first time, Leo saw a flicker of something else in her gaze, a plea perhaps. She wanted him to understand, but what could he possibly understand? She was a creature from another world, a being far beyond his comprehension. He had no idea how to help her, and yet he knew he couldn't just leave her alone. With a deep breath, Leo stepped forward and gently placed his hand on the door handle. As he did, he felt a strange sense of warmth spreading through him, as if a bond was forming between them, a silent agreement that they would face whatever came next together. It wasn't a promise of safety or certainty, but something more profound. It was as if they were both part of a story that was still unfolding. Together, they stepped out into the night. The cool air hit Leo's skin as soon as they crossed the threshold. It was late, and the streets outside were mostly deserted. The city lights cast long shadows on the pavement, and the occasional sound of a car passing by was the only noise breaking the silence. Leo glanced down at the wolf woman, who was already moving ahead, her ears swiveling as if she was listening for something in the distance. He followed her instinctively, not questioning the path she had chosen. The night seemed to stretch on forever, the city's skyline looming in the distance. But the wolf woman wasn't heading toward the city center. Instead, she took a sharp turn down a narrow alleyway, her small form disappearing into the shadows. Leo hesitated for a moment before following her into the darkness. The alley smelled of rain and damp earth, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed in the distance. He kept his eyes on the wolf woman's form, her tail flicking behind her as she moved with incredible speed. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, and Leo couldn't help but wonder if this was all a part of some larger plan, something he wasn't privy to. They walked for what felt like hours, the path winding through the city's backstreets and narrow alleys. Leo's legs began to ache, and his mind was filled with doubts. Where were they going? Why had the wolf woman led him this far from his apartment? And most importantly, what did she need from him? Finally, they came to a stop in front of a dilapidated building at the edge of the city. The walls were cracked and crumbling, and the windows were covered in grime. There was no sign of life, but something about the building seemed familiar. Leo felt an odd sense of recognition, as if he had seen this place before, though he couldn't recall when or how. The wolf woman stood still for a moment, her amber eyes fixed on the building. She sniffed the air, her body tensing as though she was preparing for something. Leo stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. There was an air of anticipation in the air, and he could feel it too, a strange sense of fate that seemed to hang over this place. Then, without warning, the wolf woman moved forward, her small paws tapping softly against the pavement. She approached the entrance of the building and stopped in front of a large, rusted door. Her ears were pinned back against her head, and she looked up at Leo, as if silently asking him to open it. Leo's hand hovered over the door handle, but he hesitated. There was something about this place that felt wrong. The building seemed ancient, like it had been abandoned for years. Yet the wolf woman was drawn to it, as if it held the answers to the questions that had been plaguing Leo's mind since the moment she appeared in his apartment. With a deep breath, Leo gripped the door handle and turned it. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dark, empty interior. The air inside smelled stale and musty, but there was something else, something familiar, lingering in the shadows. Leo's heart raced as he stepped inside, the wolf woman following closely behind. The room was dim, but he could make out the faint outline of strange markings on the walls, symbols he couldn't recognize. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and Leo felt a strange pull in his chest. It was as if something deep within him was calling out, something he couldn't explain. And then he saw it. At the far end of the room, bathed in a shaft of pale moonlight, stood a pedestal. On it was a small, glowing object, a stone, perhaps, or some kind of artifact. The light that emanated from it was soft but intense, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Leo felt drawn to it, as if it were the key to everything he had been searching for. The wolf woman stood at his side, her amber eyes fixed on the artifact. She made a small sound in her throat, as if urging him to approach. Leo stepped forward slowly, his feet carrying him toward the pedestal without his consent. He reached out and touched the stone. The moment his fingers made contact with the surface, a surge of energy rushed through his body, like a shockwave that left him breathless. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, Leo felt as though he were being pulled in every direction at once. The wolf woman stepped closer, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. Leo's mind raced with questions, but in that moment, one thing became clear. This was no coincidence. His encounter with the tiny wolf woman had been leading him here to this place, to this moment. And whatever came next would change everything. The moment Leo's fingers brushed against the glowing stone, the world around him seemed to shift. The air thickened, becoming heavy with a strange energy that hummed through his body. For a split second, he felt like he was being pulled apart, like the fabric of reality itself was stretching and bending. His vision blurred, and he heard a faint sound, almost like a distant whisper calling out to him. Leo. The whisper seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. He pulled his hand back in shock, his heart racing. His fingers tingled from the contact with the stone, and his thoughts were clouded by a mix of confusion and awe. The wolf woman beside him didn't seem to react to the surge of energy, though her amber eyes were wide, fixed on the pedestal as if she understood something he didn't. Leo took a step back, his breathing shallow. His mind was spinning. What had just happened? Why had he felt so connected to that stone? The entire room felt alive, as if it were pulsing with energy. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift in the low light, their meaning becoming more pronounced, but still indecipherable. The wolf woman took a cautious step forward, her small form moving with grace despite the tension in the air. She stopped just in front of the pedestal, her eyes never leaving the glowing stone. Leo watched her closely, unsure of what to do. She had been leading him here, but now it felt like they were both trapped in some kind of unknown force. She reached out with her paw, her claws tapping lightly against the stone's surface. The moment her paw made contact, the room seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls shifted and rearranged, glowing faintly in response to her touch. Leo's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what was happening, but everything inside him screamed that this was important. This was the key to everything. The wolf woman stepped back, her amber eyes flicking to Leo. There was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet urgency. She was waiting for him to understand. But what was there to understand? Leo had no idea what this place was or why he was standing in it. He had no answers, just a growing sense of unease. "Why did you bring me here?" Leo asked, his voice shaky but filled with determination. The wolf woman didn't answer, but her gaze told him everything. It was as though she was telling him to trust her, to trust whatever had brought them here. Leo took another deep breath, his hands trembling. The pull he felt toward the stone was undeniable. He didn't know why, but it was as if something deep inside him had awakened. Something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. He reached forward again, his hand hovering over the stone. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, the same energy he had felt when he first touched it. But this time, it didn't feel like a shock. It felt like a connection, like he was meant to be here, meant to do this. His fingers brushed against the surface of the stone again, and this time the energy didn't surge. Instead, it flowed through him, steady and warm, like a river of light. Leo closed his eyes, the sensation overwhelming him. He felt like he was no longer just a man in a room, but part of something much bigger. The walls of the room seemed to fade away, replaced by images of stars, planets, and galaxies. He saw a vast, endless expanse stretching out before him, filled with worlds he could never imagine. And in the center of it all there was a figure. A tall, regal being, its face shrouded in shadow, but its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The being reached out toward him, its voice echoing in his mind. "Chosen one!" Leo's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know where he was or who the being was, but the words resonated deep within him. Chosen one? It was as if the very universe itself was calling to him, telling him that he had a purpose, one he had never known until now. The vision was gone as quickly as it had come, and Leo found himself back in the room, standing before the pedestal. The wolf woman was still beside him, her amber eyes watching him closely, but there was something different in her gaze now. It was as if she had been waiting for him to see what he had just seen. "What was that?" Leo whispered, his voice barely audible. He turned to the wolf woman, his mind still reeling from the vision. She didn't answer, but her presence felt more comforting now, as if she were offering him reassurance. He stood there for a few moments, trying to process everything that had just happened. The room was quiet, but the energy in the air was palpable. The symbols on the walls were now glowing brighter than before, and Leo couldn't help but feel like they were part of some grand design, a plan that he was now a part of. The wolf woman moved again, stepping toward the glowing stone. She seemed more focused than ever, as if she understood what needed to be done. Leo watched her closely, his curiosity piqued. What was she trying to tell him? What did she know that he did? She gestured toward the stone with her paw, then looked up at Leo, her eyes wide, pleading. It was clear now that she wanted him to do something, but Leo didn't know what. He had no idea how to unlock whatever mystery lay within the stone. He was just an ordinary man. How could he possibly understand something so complex, so powerful? But the wolf woman's gaze never wavered. She seemed to trust him, and in that moment Leo realized that maybe, just maybe, he could trust her too. He reached out again, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the stone. The moment his hand made contact, the energy surged once more, but this time it felt different. It was a soft, almost gentle pull, like a thread connecting him to something far greater than himself. He felt a sudden sense of clarity, as if the fog in his mind had lifted. He knew what he had to do. The stone shifted beneath his touch, and a low hum filled the room. Leo felt a rush of warmth spreading through his body, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, their meaning becoming clearer. For the first time, he understood what they were saying. It was a language, ancient and unfamiliar, but the words flowed into his mind like a river. "The path begins here," Leo murmured, his voice steady despite the overwhelming sensation of power surrounding him. He looked down at the wolf woman who was watching him intently. She nodded as if affirming that he had done the right thing. Suddenly, the pedestal shifted, the stone glowing even brighter. Leo stepped back, startled by the change. The room seemed to tremble and the walls began to warp and distort. The symbols on the walls swirled around them, spinning faster and faster until they formed a single, unified pattern. The air felt charged with energy, and Leo could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The room fell silent, the energy dissipating like a storm passing. Leo stood there, trying to catch his breath, unsure of what had just happened. But he could feel it now. Whatever had been hidden in this place, whatever ancient force had been waiting, it had been unlocked. And now he and the wolf woman were at the center of it all. The wolf woman stepped forward, her amber eyes filled with something Leo couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear or confusion, but something deeper. She seemed to understand that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would take them both far from everything they had ever known. Leo followed her gaze toward the pedestal, where the stone now lay dormant, its glow fading. But he knew that it wasn't truly gone. The power it held was still there, waiting for them to tap into it. For a moment there was silence between them. Then, with a soft, determined growl, the wolf woman turned toward the door, her tail flicking behind her as she moved. Leo felt a surge of resolve deep within him. He didn't know where this path would take them, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone. The wolf woman, this strange, mysterious creature, had chosen him for a reason. And together they would uncover the secrets that lay ahead. Leo took a deep breath, stepping forward. Whatever came next, he was ready. Leo followed the wolf woman down the dimly lit hallway, his heart still pounding in his chest. What had just happened? The strange energy, the glowing stone, the symbols, everything felt like a dream, but it was so real. His mind was racing, trying to piece together what he had just experienced. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, living an ordinary life, but now everything had changed. The wolf woman moved ahead of him, her small form darting through the shadows. She didn't look back to see if Leo was following, but he didn't need to be told. There was something about her, something in the way she carried herself, that made him want to stay close. She was no longer just a mysterious creature that had appeared in his apartment. She was someone he was beginning to understand, someone he needed to protect. They walked in silence, the soft tapping of her paws echoing in the empty hallway. Leo's mind was still spinning with questions. What was this place they had entered? What was the stone, and why had it called to him? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper at play, something that connected him to this world in ways he couldn't yet understand. The wolf woman led him to the end of the hall, where a large door stood before them. It was made of old, weathered wood, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in years. There were no windows, no signs of life, just the quiet stillness of the building around them. Leo glanced at the wolf woman, who was already standing by the door, her tail flicking as she sniffed the air. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, as though she had been here before. Leo stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door handle. As his fingers brushed the cold metal, he felt a strange vibration, as if the door itself was alive. It was as if the stone they had touched earlier had left some kind of mark on him, an imprint that made him more attuned to the world around him. He could feel the energy still pulsing, though it was faint now, like a whisper that brushed against the edges of his consciousness. With a deep breath, Leo turned the handle and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, the sound cutting through the silence. The room beyond was dark, but there was a faint glow emanating from somewhere inside. Leo stepped cautiously into the room, the wolf woman following close behind. The room was large, far larger than Leo had expected. The walls were covered in strange markings, similar to the ones from the previous room, but these were more intricate, almost like a map or a blueprint. They stretched from floor to ceiling, winding around the room in patterns that seemed to change as Leo moved. It was like the room itself was alive, the walls shifting and adjusting to his presence. At the center of the room stood an altar, ancient and worn, but still standing strong. On top of the altar was another stone, similar to the one they had touched before, but this one was different. It was larger, its surface etched with runes that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. The energy in the room intensified, and Leo felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This stone, whatever it was, felt far more powerful than the first. The wolf woman stood motionless at Leo's side, her amber eyes fixed on the altar. She was silent, but Leo could feel her tension, the way her muscles coiled beneath her fur, as if she were preparing for something. Leo took a hesitant step toward the altar, his hand reaching out, but he stopped just short of touching the stone. He wasn't sure what to do, but something told him that this was the next step. He had been brought here for a reason, just like the wolf woman, and now it was time to uncover the truth. He glanced at her again. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The wolf woman didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her gaze, intense and steady, told him everything he needed to know. She was waiting for him to make the next move, to take the final step that would unlock whatever secrets this place held. Leo took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing his hand on the stone. The moment his fingers touched the surface, a jolt of energy shot through him, stronger than anything he had felt before. It was like electricity coursing through his veins, burning with heat and power. His body tensed, and for a brief moment he thought he might collapse. But then, just as quickly, the energy settled into something more familiar, a steady hum that vibrated through his chest. The wolf woman stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as if she were watching for something. Leo's vision blurred again, and the room around him seemed to shift. The walls stretched out, pulling away from him, and he found himself standing in a vast, empty void. Above him, stars sparkled in the darkness and planets spun slowly in the distance. It was the same vision he had seen before, the same infinite expanse of the universe. But this time it was different. He wasn't just a spectator. This time he was part of it. He could feel the pull of the stars, the way they moved in perfect harmony. It was as if he was one with the universe, connected to everything in ways he couldn't comprehend. He could feel the energy of every planet, every star, flowing through him. It was overwhelming, but at the same time it felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And then he saw it. The figure from before, the one he had seen in his vision, appeared again. This time it was clearer. The being was tall and radiant, its face still hidden in shadow, but its eyes glowed with a powerful light. It reached out toward him, its hands extending as if to embrace him. "Chosen one," the voice echoed in his mind again, a low, resonant sound that vibrated deep within his chest. "You have come to unlock the truth. You have come to fulfill the purpose that has been waiting for you." Leo's heart raced, his mind spinning. Purpose. "What purpose?" he whispered, his voice shaky. He didn't understand. He was just an ordinary man, a nobody. How could he possibly be chosen for anything? The being's gaze softened, and a sense of peace washed over Leo. "The path you walk is not your own. It is the path of many, the path of those who came before you. You are a part of something greater than yourself. The stone you touched, the energy you feel, it is the key to unlocking your true potential. You are a bridge between worlds, a vessel for the power that lies beyond." Leo's mind struggled to keep up with the words, but something deep within him resonated with the message. The wolf woman had led him here for a reason. He wasn't just in the right place at the right time. He was part of something much bigger. The truth was out there, waiting for him to uncover it. The vision faded, and Leo found himself back in the room with the altar. The wolf woman was still standing by his side, her eyes now calm but full of understanding. She didn't need to speak. Her presence, her silent support was enough. Leo took a deep breath and stepped back from the altar, his mind racing with what he had just experienced. He felt the weight of everything settling over him, the knowledge that he was part of something far beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He had a purpose now, a mission. The wolf woman was his guide, and together they would unlock the mysteries of the universe. "I'm ready," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time he felt like he was no longer just drifting through life. He was on the path to something greater, something that would change the course of his life, and maybe even the course of the universe. The wolf woman gave a small, approving nod, and without another word, she turned toward the door. Leo followed her, stepping into the unknown, knowing that whatever came next, he was no longer alone. Together, they would uncover the truth, and he would finally understand why he had been chosen. The door closed behind them, sealing their fate. The journey had just begun.